afternoon. How's everybody doing? All right. I'm happy to be in Warren with you, and I've got some feedback. How's that? Sounding good? All right. My name's Craig Register. I'm a lifelong Michigander, a father, a teacher, and a union member. That's right. AFT Local 6244, or otherwise known as LEO. Lecturers Employees Organization, and my president, Ian Robinson, is here, and some of my other members and staff are right over here. So, go Leo. Probably most importantly, I'm someone like you who plans to work like hell over the next 18 months to make sure Bernie Sanders is the next president of the United States. I'm also a mind reader. And right now, I bet you most of you are going, who the heck is this guy, by the way? Well, I have a student who works for the Bernie campaign, and reached out by this student earlier this week. I said, hey, Craig, we're going to have this rally in Warren. You want to come? I said, sure. I was already planning on coming. And then she said, well, we had this meeting, and we're looking for, I don't know, kind of like the dorky, middle-aged white guy. I said, why the hell did you call me? That was the joke. That was the icebreaker. What I'm really here to tell you is that I thought a lot this week when I was invited. I'm privileged to have the opportunity. I think the fact that I'm hearing a lot of feedback. You guys good? Do I need to back up a little bit? Is that better? So my main job is to make sure the mic works for Abdul, because I know everybody wants to hear Abdul talk. Now, what I'm going to do is give you 3 reasons why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders and why I think we need to talk about and tell the world over the next 12 months leading up to the Michigan primary and then afterwards for the actual election. Reason number 1 for me, Bernie Sanders is a small D Democrat. What does that mean? He understands that rebuilding our democracy, a society where we, the people here, drive the agenda, not just a few rich folks, that is absolutely essential to the future of our nation and world. There's a few things you may know about Macomb County. I live in Oakland County, and there's Wayne County, and this is a really diverse, incredibly important region in so many different ways, and I appreciate being here in Macomb County. It's also one of the more misunderstood counties, I think, in the country in many respects. You may have heard of the so-called Reagan Democrats. You ever heard of them? Well, we shouldn't necessarily boo, because I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few folks here. If you didn't vote for Reagan, maybe you know somebody who did. And the fact of the matter is, all after 84 and 1980, when Reagan won those elections, all these political scientists went crazy trying to figure out what was going on in Macomb County. They coined the term Reagan Democrats because they were trying to figure out who were these people that were voting for Reagan who used to vote for Democrats, right? They had all these theories, these elitist misunderstandings of the good and decent folks that work and live here in Macomb County. What Bernie understands about what happened then is that no other Democratic candidate understands is the fact that those folks didn't leave the Democratic Party, but the party actually might have left them in the 80s. What he understood, and he understands now, and we saw this in 2016 when 54% of Macomb County came out to vote for Donald Trump. There's still a lot of disaffection and questions about the party. When the Democratic Party recommits itself to working people, the people will come back to the Democratic Party. Reason number 2, and I'm going to make it quicker. Bernie understands the main enemy we face today, as much as we may despise him, and we despise him very much, it's not Donald Trump. Our main enemy is something we could call Trumpism, or corporatism, or, God forbid, dare I say it, capitalism. Whatever we call it, and we can have those debates. What we do know is this: money has an incredibly unfair and unearned power in our society, and that needs to stop. Reason number 3, and I'll be done. Why I support Bernie Sanders, and possibly one of the most important reasons of them all. Bernie understands that there's a weapon that the right has used over the decades for so long in this country, and it's called divide and conquer. They divide us, and they try and get us to divide ourselves, and then they conquer us through doing that. That is something that Bernie understands historically. We need to understand that, and we need to push back against that in every possible way we can as we build this campaign. And what Bernie says to us, and this is where I'll end, is that here's how we push back against divide and conquer. We build a diverse, broad-based, popular coalition that's multiracial, multi-generational, multi-religious, multicultural, multilingual, multi-ethnic, multi-able, multi-everybody coalition. And if we do that here in Macomb County, in Wayne County, in Oakland County, in all the counties in Michigan, if we do that here, then no billionaire, whatever their name, will ever be able to defeat us again. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Detroit real estate developer and creative community organizer, Monique Becker.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Monique Becker, and today I'm talking about money. I was born in Detroit and raised in the suburbs by mixed-race parents. I attended Birmingham Public Schools, where I learned alongside the children of millionaires while spending many evenings and weekends with my family in Brightmoor, one of the poorer neighborhoods on the city's west side. One day I could be with friends, swimming in pools with waterfalls, and the next playing in the street, getting wet by a hydrant outside my granny's house. I ate gourmet meals at a middle school party on Friday and bridge card hot dogs on a Saturday. To me, it was clear. Some folks lived comfortably, while other folks couldn't seem to escape the cycle of paycheck to paycheck, food stamps to food stamps, and the frustrating balancing act that was finding a low-paying job to uplift oneself, only to have our government support pulled from under them because they make too much. Huh? Fast forward. I'm a 25-year-old former school teacher turned real estate developer who lives, works, and invests in Detroit. Woo! I have worked on deals from tens of thousands to tens of millions. I have seen that money flows and money grows. For whom? Bernie Sanders knows. Income inequality and the increasing gap between the rich and the poor, the haves and the have-nots, reduces us all. I like Bernie because he speaks plainly, yet thoughtfully and sanely about the real issues facing our nation, hurting our states, cities, towns, and each human being, both inside and outside the United States, that is impacted by our government's decisions. A college education is no longer insurance against poverty. Rather, you get that degree and you get that debt. You get that debt and you realize you wish they would have taught us about return on investment in high school instead of pretending an egg is a baby. I eat eggs. Babies need money. You know, we need cheese for the egg. The American dream says that prosperity comes from hard work unhindered by unfair barriers. That if there is a will, there is a way. Well, there's not a will saving us, most of us, millions in funny money. So I guess that's how our country ended up here. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with having money and being compensated for one's success. I worked what I hope to be my last day for others just yesterday for entrepreneurial pursuits in real estate in Detroit. Find me after and let's talk for-profit community development. I mean, honestly, I like money, I need money. My community needs money, likes money. We all like money, need money. What disturbs me, however, is that oftentimes mass and wealth is acquired at the expense and detriment of others. Corporations amass unimaginable sums of money while paying little to no tax, barely the minimum wage, and yet are revered for their success. Again, huh? I know that Bernie's plan for universal health care supports me as an entrepreneur who does not have to choose between investing in my community, my American dream, and the security of my body and mind. I'm focused on generational wealth for all of us working people who bleed red, not blue. I pull myself up from my Timberland bootstraps and step onto the job, often the only woman on the whole damn construction site. I know that Bernie's policies support me as a young woman of color in a world stacked against me. We need Bernie Sanders as president to lead the way. But as he says, real change never takes place from the top on down, but always from the bottom on up. In Detroit, when we come up, we bring our community with us. Our community is vast and inclusive. Our community is our kids, our schools, our elders. Our community is our neighbors, that guy, this region, all of pure Michigan, y los Estados Unidos. Let's live together. Let's thrive together. And with Bernie Sanders, let's change our nation together. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage former local Michigan labor leader and organizer with Teamsters and UAW, Dennis Naselli.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Macomb. First thing I want to do, because we're going to make history and the future right here today in Macomb County, I want everybody to put your hands up in your air, both of them. Now roll your sleeves up. Roll them sleeves up. Everybody, come on. We're going to work. I promise you, as a labor leader here in the Detroit area, I organize people from coast to coast. I want you to know that labor will be behind Bernie solidly. I will work with Rich Trumka of the AFL-CIO, Jim Hoffa of the Teamsters, Bob King, Leo Gerard of the United Steelworkers. Those people get off their butts. It's not work as usual. They will do this thing for Bernie this season. Now, I want to compliment Bernie. Perhaps some of you don't know, but everyone on his staff is a union member of Local 400 UFCW. We will make history and the future. Bernie has the values, the morals that we share with labor. Every union member shares those values. Bernie Sanders does. I promise you, we will get to work today. Roll them sleeves up right now, and Bernie will be for labor because labor is going to be for Bernie. Roll them up.
Please welcome to the stage former professor, doctor, civil servant, and former Democratic candidate for Michigan Governor, Abdul El-Sayed.
All right. Who here knows that health care is a human right? Let me hear you. And who knows that we've got to put people over corporate profit? And who here knows that when we come together, we will win this election in 2020? Now, let me tell you why I'm here. I spent the last 2 years of my life touring this incredible state of Michigan. I had the opportunity to look you eye to eye in your homes, in your VFW halls, in your union halls, in your tap rooms. And everywhere I went, it didn't matter if I was talking to poor or working or retired white folks in places like Kalkaska or here in Macomb, or poor or working or retired African-American folks in places like Flint or Detroit or Benton Harbor. They were asking the same basic questions. They were asking, why is it that corporate CEOs are making $19 million a year while people in our state still don't have health care? Who's going to fight for Medicare for all? They're asking, why is it that people in Flint have waited 5 years for clean water while we're allowing Nestle to take unlimited amounts of water for $200 a year? Who's going to stand up for universal water? They're asking why it is that we still don't have a $15 minimum wage while we're watching corporations get tax cuts from this administration. Who is going to stand for the people? They're asking why it is that the likes of Betsy DeVos are privatizing our schools when we know that's our future. They're asking, who is going to stand up for public schools? These are the questions that bring us here today. I don't have to tell you the challenges that we face with this administration. This individual who doesn't understand the basic ideals of this country, the ideals that go something like this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal. But if we're going to get there, we know we have a lot more work to do. Now, I got a little 16-month-old baby girl back home. And I hate to say it, but in these United States, her probability of earning is still 25 cents on less than her male counterparts. She's ethnically half Egyptian, ethnically half Indian, but 100% American. Her family's history draws back to the founding of this great country when they wrote that Constitution. The first three words of that Constitution are what? We the people. In order to form a more perfect union. Now let me tell you, in that more perfect union, everybody has health care. In that more perfect union, we recognize climate change as an imminent threat and we pass a Green New Deal. In that more perfect union, we stand up for public educators. In that more perfect union, we stand with our union brothers and sisters demanding $15 in a union. In that more perfect union, we recognize that it shouldn't matter the color of your skin, shouldn't matter how you pray, shouldn't matter who you love, how you identify, shouldn't matter where you grew up, that you will belong to we the people. Now we're here today because we've been united by a man. That man has been saying the same thing since as long as we can remember. He's been talking about why it is that we've got to stand up against the corporations and we've got to stand for Medicare for all. He's been talking about the imminent threat of climate change. He's been talking about the fact that we've got to stand up to the corporate kleptocracy. We've got to demand that working people have their day, have their rights in our country. He's been talking about what it means to come together as a movement for that better America that we want to build for our kids and our grandkids. We are here today because of a man who understands what it means to say we the people. A man who's been leading for a more perfect union since as long as we can remember. A man whose integrity speaks for itself. A man who believes in this country, believes in us, believes in what we can do when we all show up for our democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd love you to put your hands together, to raise your voices for the one, the only, Senator Bernie Sanders.
We are the major.
Feel the burn, make them feel the burn, all the way to the White House, feel the burn. Feel the burn, make them feel the burn, so the haters on the left, they can feel the burn. You see him scared.
Thank you. Thank you, Michigan. Thank you. But you're going to hear me. Thank you very much for Bernie. But you know what? It ain't me. It is. That's right. And let me begin by thanking Act Casual for their great music. And our speakers, Craig Register and Monique Becker and Dennis Nazili. And let me thank my good friend, who is going to help us out on this campaign, Dr. Abdul El Sayed, who ran a great, great campaign for governor here. And let me begin by offering a special thanks to the people of Michigan. You know, when we campaigned here, a few days before the elections, the pundits determined that there was a 1% chance that we would win. Well, we won. And that victory was very significant for our campaign, so I thank you for that. We won in the Democratic primary here in Michigan in 2016, and you know what? We're going to win the Democratic primary here. And in 2020, we're going to win the general election here in the state. This weekend, I am visiting not only Michigan, but Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. We're putting a lot of miles on the car. And I guess you all know why we are doing that. 4 years ago, or no, 2.5 years ago, despite losing the popular vote by some 3 million votes, Donald Trump won all of those states. And we're here today to say that mistake is not going to be repeated in 2020. In our country, it goes without saying that people have political differences, and that's called democracy, and that is a good thing. Some of our friends are conservative, some moderate, some progressive, and we argue about issues. But I happen to believe that whether you are a progressive, a moderate, or a conservative, you are not proud that today we have a president of the United States who is a pathological liar. And I think, when we think about somebody setting an example for the children of this country, you don't want somebody who lies all of the time since he was elected, and in fact, when he was on the campaign trail. And when he was running for president, the very biggest lie that he told here in Michigan and in Vermont and all over this country was that he was going to stand with the working class of our country, that he was on their side, and that he would take on powerful special interest to protect working families. You took the words right out of my mouth. That was a monstrous lie. And let me give you a few examples of what Trump said in Michigan and Wisconsin and all over this country, as opposed to what he has actually done as president. When he ran for president, you'll recall that Trump said that he would provide health insurance to everybody. Remember that? Everybody. Well, that sounded pretty good. And a lot of people voted for him because they understood that everybody should have health insurance. That's what he said during the campaign. But as president, he did exactly the opposite. As president, what Trump did was work overtime to repeal the ACA and to throw 32 million Americans off of the health care they currently have. Can you imagine that? People dealing with cancer and diabetes and heart disease who are kept alive by the health insurance they now have, and his plan was to throw all of them off the health care that they have, do away with the protections that now exist for pre-existing conditions, tell young people who are currently on their parents' insurance that they will lose that insurance, raise premiums for senior citizens. And I say to President Trump, throwing 32 million people off the health insurance they have is not standing up for working families. You'll all recall that during his campaign, Donald Trump said, "I am a different type of Republican." Remember that? Different type of Republican. I am not going to cut Medicare and cut Medicaid and cut Social Security. Shock of all shocks, he lied. His last budget called for $1.5 trillion cut over 10 years for Medicaid, $850 billion for Medicare, and cuts to Social Security as well. And by the way, you all know that Medicaid is the public health insurance program for low-income people. What many of you may not know is that about 2/3 of nursing home costs are covered by Medicaid. So if you have a mom or a dad in a nursing home right now dealing with Alzheimer's or dealing with a serious illness, the likelihood is that Medicaid is covering that bill. Think about what happens to those people and the families who love them when you cut Medicaid by $1.5 trillion. Shame on you, Donald Trump. Oh, and Donald Trump, the great hero of the working class, he said that if he's elected, the tax plan that he would bring forth would not benefit the wealthy. Really? Trump's tax plan, as you all know, provides 83% of its benefits to the top 1%. Anybody here happen to know how much Amazon, one of the largest corporations in America, paid in taxes last year? Zero. That's not only Amazon, that's Chevron, IBM, Eli Lilly, and many other major corporations. And I say to President Trump, standing up for working families does not mean giving huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country and the largest corporations. Donald Trump, during his campaign, promised that he would substantially reduce the trade deficit and prevent the outsourcing of American jobs, an issue obviously of great concern to the state of Michigan. But since Trump has been president, the trade deficit has gone up by $120 billion, and his own Labor Department certified that 185,000 American jobs have been shipped overseas. And the NAFTA treaty that Trump renegotiated with Mexico will still allow companies like General Motors to send our jobs to Mexico. So today I challenge Donald Trump, for once in your life, keep your campaign promises. Go back to the drawing board on NAFTA. Do not send this treaty to Congress unless it includes strong and swift enforcement mechanisms to raise the wages of workers and to prevent corporations from outsourcing American jobs to Mexico. During his campaign, Trump said he was going to stop Wall Street from getting away with murder. That was his expression. And he was going to reinstate the Glass-Steagall Act. But as president, Donald Trump signed legislation into law to deregulate Wall Street and provide large financial institutions with a massive tax break. Wow, that's standing up to Wall Street. Trump's tax plan increased bank profits by nearly $29 billion, allowing them to make record-breaking profits. Our political revolution, as I mentioned a moment ago, began here in a significant way in Michigan when the people of this state demanded a government and an economy that works for all people and not just the 1%. And that is what this campaign is about. And I want to welcome you today for my first campaign stop in Michigan to a campaign which says, with confidence, with optimism, and with love, that the underlying principles of our government will not be greed, will not be kleptocracy, will not be based on hatred or lies. The underlying principles of our government will not be based on racism, sexism, xenophobia, homophobia, or religious bigotry. Those are un-American sentiments, and together we are going to end that mentality. The principles, love you too. Thank you. The principles of our government are going to be based on what we believe in our hearts, and that is justice. And justice is a profound belief which must motivate us every single day. And when I talk about justice, we're talking about economic justice. We are talking about social justice. We're talking about racial justice. We are talking about environmental justice. Donald Trump and his friends want to divide us up. And I got to say that I disagree with Trump on almost everything, but I'll tell you what, and that's an understatement, but I'll tell you what kind of upsets me the most, and that I think is that almost all presidents of the United States, whether they're conservative or liberal, progressive or whatever, kind of understand that the function of a president of the United States of America is to bring our people together, not divide us up. And what Trump is very intentionally, in a very calculated way, trying to divide us up based on the color of our skin, based on our gender, based on the country in which we were born, based on our religion or our sexual orientation. Well, what our campaign is about and what our government will be about is exactly the opposite. We're going to bring our people together, black and white and Latino, Native American and Asian American, men and women, gay and straight, native born and immigrant. That is what we stand for. And when we talk about justice, let me be very clear about what I mean. It means that we will no longer stand idly by and allow this country to move into an oligarchic form of society with massive levels of income and wealth inequality, where a handful of billionaires control the economic and political life of this country. That is not the America we will allow to happen. Now, not a lot of people talk about it. You don't hear much about it in the media or discussions in the Congress. But justice means to me that we will not allow the three wealthiest families in America to own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. That is not justice. While at the same time, as the billionaires become even richer, more than 20% of our children are living in poverty, and veterans who put their lives on the line to defend us are sleeping out on the streets. That is not justice. Justice means that we will no longer accept 49%, almost half of all new income created today, going to the top 1%, while tens of thousands of workers in Michigan and in Vermont and all over this country are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs to take care of their families. That's not justice. And brothers and sisters, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world, justice is not taking place when over half of our people are living paycheck to paycheck. You all know what that means, paycheck? I grew up in a family living paycheck to paycheck. I know what it means. And it means that if your car breaks down and you can't get to work and you get fired from your job because you can't get to work, you can't take care of your kids. And what paycheck to paycheck means is you stay up nights worrying that if somebody in the family gets sick, you can't afford to take them to the doctor. Or if somebody, God forbid, ends up in the hospital, your family goes bankrupt. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, half of our people should not be forced to live paycheck to paycheck, stressed out every single day. And when we talk about justice, let's lay it on the line. We will no longer accept CEOs of major corporations earning 300 times what their employees are making, while at the same time, life expectancy in the United States is actually going down. Justice means that we will no longer accept the reality of the top 25 hedge fund managers on Wall Street making twice as much as all 140,000 kindergarten teachers throughout this country. I mean, what kind of priorities is it when 25 hedge fund managers make twice the income of all of the kindergarten teachers throughout this country, and school district after school district has to cut back on the programs they provide our kids? And by the way, when we are talking about injustice in this country, we are also talking about racial injustice. At a time of overall massive levels of income and wealth disparity, the situation is much worse for African American families. It is not acceptable to me that black families own 1/10 of the wealth of white families, that the infant mortality rate within the African American community is 2.5 times the white community, that redlining in housing continues to exist, that black businesses cannot get the loans they need at affordable rates, and that black schools are underfunded. So when we talk about justice, what we are talking about is ending institutional racism from one end of this country to the other. And let me say a word to the young people of our country. At a time when we have seen an explosion in technology and a huge increase in worker productivity, we will no longer accept a situation in which everything being equal, unless we change it, the younger generation, for the first time in modern American history, will have a lower standard of living than their parents. Our young people are leaving school deeply in debt. The wages in real dollars that they're earning are lower than what their parents earned. They're having a hard time finding affordable housing, and they are seeing less mobility. Now, I have 4 kids and 7 beautiful grandchildren. Downward mobility is not acceptable to me. This campaign is about moving our people up, not down. But it is not just economic justice that we are fighting for. It is political justice. Together, we are going to create a political system. This is a very radical idea. You ready for a radical idea? This looks like a radical group of people. Well, here it is. To me, democracy means one person, one vote, not billionaires buying elections. And that is why, together, we're going to overturn this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. It is why we're going to move to public funding of elections. And I'll tell you something else, and I say this as somebody who has run for office many times in Vermont, and sometimes I've lost. Fortunately, most times I've won. But I can say, and I think I speak for most public officials, it has never ever occurred to me when I've run for office to think about what parts of the state I am not strong in and how I can prevent people from voting because they might vote against me. And all over this country, you got cowardly Republican governors who are trying as hard as they can to suppress the vote, trying hard to prevent people of color, of young people, of poor people to vote. How disgusting is that? I mean, it really is. Look, you know, I got my ideas, other people have their ideas. You take your ideas to the people, maybe you win, maybe you don't. That's called democracy. But you know, I say to those Republican governors who don't have the guts to participate in free, fair, and open elections, get the hell out of politics and get another job. So we are going to work, and our administration is going to work on a very simple proposition. If you're 18 years of age in America and you're an American citizen, you have the right to vote. End of discussion. Four years ago, when I was here in Michigan, the ideas that we were talking about were considered by establishment politics and the establishment media as radical and extreme ideas that nobody in America would support. Remember that? I'll give you some examples. We talked 4 years ago, very radical idea, about raising the minimum wage to a living wage. And the establishment said, Bernie wants to actually double the federal minimum wage to $15. What a radical idea. Nobody will go for that idea. Listen to this one. Whoa. Bernie said 4 years ago, you ready for another radical idea? Okay, listen to this one. Health care is a human right, not a privilege. And the establishment said, too radical. Oh my goodness, imagine the United States doing what every other major country on earth is doing. And 4 years ago I said, you know what? If we invested $1 trillion to rebuild our crumbling infrastructure, we could create up to 15 million good-paying union jobs. Oh, much too radical an idea. And here's another one. I was on remember this like it was yesterday, I was on a nationally televised debate. And the moderator said, well, you know, Bernie, what do you think the major national security crisis facing America is? And I thought he thought that I would say, well, it's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, terrorism, whatever it is. And those are very serious issues. I said the major crisis, national security crisis we face is climate change. 4 years ago, not a whole lot of Americans And then I said 4 years ago that, we need real criminal justice reform in America, and that includes legalizing marijuana. Oh, much too radical. Oh, that's something clearly the American people never go for. Much too radical an idea. And we talked about immigration reform, too radical. And here's something, whoa, 4 years have come and gone. 4 years ago, we talked about candidates not having to be dependent on super PACs funded by the wealthy. And I was told, Bernie, you can't do that because politics is always about candidates going to rich people's homes and raising money. That's the way it has always been. Can't be changed. And then we said 4 years ago, maybe it doesn't make a lot of sense for a small number of super delegates at the Democratic National Convention to control the outcome. Well, a funny thing happened over the last few years. In 2016, we won here in Michigan and in 21 other states around the country. We received over 13 million votes, more than 1,700 delegates at the Democratic National Convention, and most importantly to me, and I think to the future of this country, we received more votes from young people, black and white and Latino, than Trump and Clinton combined. And by the way, those ideas that we talked about 4 years ago that seemed so radical at that time, well, today virtually all of those ideas are now supported by a majority of the American people. And they are the ideas that Democratic candidates from school board to president are now supporting. So, brothers and sisters, we should be enormously proud that we have come a long way in transforming politics in America over the last 4 years, and I thank you very much for making that happen. And now our job is to complete what we started. We are going to turn our vision and our progressive agenda into reality. We are going to bring back the beautiful concept of justice to this country. And let me be very specific in telling you what I mean by that. When I talk about justice, I say to the private health insurance companies, whether you like it or not, the United States of America will join every other major country and guarantee health care to all of our people as a right. We will no longer accept the absurdity, and not a lot of people know this, of spending twice as much per capita on health care as do the people of any other country. We're now spending $11,000 per person on health care, and yet we got 30 million people without any insurance, and we have even more, including many of you, who are underinsured with high deductibles and high co-payments. Now, I understand, and it's clear, they've admitted it, they've acknowledged it, that the insurance companies will spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in opposition to what we are going to achieve. Well, they can spend all the money that they want, they can tell all the lies that they want, but this country is going to adopt a Medicare for all single-payer program. And when we talk about greedy institutions, let me say a brief word about the drug companies. Here you have a situation where in the United States of America, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for the same exact medicine sold in Canada and throughout the rest of the world. I will never forget, as long as I live, that way back in 1999, when I was a congressman from Vermont, I took the first group of Americans over the Canadian border to buy medicine in Montreal. Never forget this. The people I brought over was a busload of working-class women who were mostly dealing with breast cancer. They were fighting for their lives. They walked into a pharmacy that we had previously arranged in Montreal, and they bought the medicine that they needed. Same exact medicine they were buying in our country for 1/10 of the price. And tears were coming out of the eyes of some of these women. So I say to the drug companies that we will not accept the situation where last year the 5 major drug companies made $50 billion in profits, while 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford to fill the prescriptions their doctors wrote. Got that? Think how insane that is, how dysfunctional that is. People are sick. They go to the doctor. The doctor writes out a prescription, and they can't fill the prescription, so they get sicker. We together are going to end the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. And today we say to Walmart and to McDonald's and Burger King and all of the low-wage employers in this country, stop paying your employees starvation wages. People cannot make it on $8, $9, $10 an hour. Nobody can do that. And nobody should be forced to work 2 or 3 jobs or 60 or 70 hours a week just to pay the bills. So whether Walmart likes it or not, yes, we are going to raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. And by the way, it's not only raising the minimum wage to a living wage, we are going to make it easier for workers to join unions. Because if we are going to grow the middle class in America, we have got to grow the trade union movement. And I should tell you that I have introduced legislation that I will fight for as president that says that if 50% of workers in a unit sign a card saying they want a union, they will have a union. And by the way, something relevant to Michigan is our legislation in this that we have introduced would end and put a ban to right-to-work laws in states all over this country. And today we say to corporate America, we will not allow you to shut down plants in the United States, throw American workers out on the street, and move to cheap labor abroad. And if a company thinks, profitable company, thinks that they're going to shut down here and move abroad and hire people abroad at $2 or $3 an hour and then line up at the federal trough for federal contracts, they got another guess coming. When large corporations get federal contracts, we have got to know that they are employers who have a conscience, employers who treat their employees with respect and dignity. Today we say that when a worker is promised a pension, that pension will not be cut. One of the more disgusting things that happened in Congress over the last number of years is that the multi-employer pension plan was cut significantly. And I want to say a word about this because it goes even deeper than the pension. It goes to whether or not people have faith in government. Now, workers took pay cuts. Workers ended up paying more for health care because they were promised by their employer that there would be a decent pension available to them when they retired. And then a few years ago, Congress said, no, we are going to turn our backs on that promise and we're going to create a situation where pensions that were promised to workers will be cut by 40, 50, or 60%. That is not acceptable. If Congress could provide $1 trillion bailout to the large corporations and the banks that help destroy our economy, we can make certain that we keep the promises that were made to workers in terms of their pensions. This is America, and we should not have an infrastructure which is crumbling. This is the wealthiest country in the world. Why are our roads and our bridges and our water systems and our wastewater plants and our airports, why are they falling apart? Why is it that millions of people in America are spending 40, 50, 60% of their limited incomes on housing? We're going to put millions of people back to work rebuilding our infrastructure. And today we say to the parents here in Michigan and all over this country that all of us know that the ages of 0 through 4 are the most important years of human intellectual and emotional growth. And yet, all over this country, we have a child care system which is not working for the children, not working for the parents, and not working for child care employees. So what we say today, that in the United States of America, we want our children and working parents to have the best quality child care in the world, universal, affordable, pre-K education. And today we say to our young people, we want you to have the best education possible, that the world has changed in 50 years, and if you're going to go out and make it in the middle class, many of you are going to need a higher education, and many of you are going to need the technical training that is necessary for the building trades. So it is not a radical idea to say that we are, A, going to make public colleges, universities tuition free, and that we are going to make sure that our young people who don't want to go to college but just need the training to be plumbers and carpenters and sheet metal workers, that they are going to get the training they need, and that also we're going to deal with an issue which is grating on the minds of so many of our people. Let me ask you all a question. How many of you are dealing with student debt right now? All right, I have talked to people, young people and not so young people who have been paying off debt for decades. People should not be punished for the crime of trying to get a decent education. So if we can create a tax system that allows Amazon and other major corporations to pay zero in federal income taxes, we can create a tax system which will cover substantial reductions in student debt. And when we talk about vulnerable people, we don't talk about this enough, it's not just that we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. It is that we have 20% of our senior citizens trying to make it on $13,500 or less on Social Security. Can you imagine? Think about it for a moment. Think about being 80, 90 years of age and trying to get the medicine that you need, trying to keep your house warm, trying to buy the food you need on $13,500. Now, my Republican colleagues in the Senate and in the House, they have a brilliant idea. They want to cut Social Security benefits. Well, we've got some bad news for them. We are not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security benefits. And today, we say to Donald Trump and the fossil fuel industry that climate change is not a hoax, but is a massive threat to our country and the entire planet. And I know many of you are familiar with a number of reports that have been published from the leading scientists in the world. And they tell us that we have 12 years to transform our energy system, or else this country and this world will suffer irreparable damage. Irreparable damage. Now we have a moral responsibility. We came into this earth, and we utilize this earth. This is our planet. And we have a moral responsibility to make certain that the planet we leave to our kids and our grandchildren is healthy and habitable. That is a moral responsibility. And when we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, we will create millions of good-paying jobs. We're going to make our older buildings energy efficient and cut back on the fuel bills that people are not paying. We're going to invest in wind and solar and other sustainable energies. And in the process, among other things, we'll save the planet. I don't know about you, but, that seems to be of some importance. And we can't do it alone. I mean, it's not an American issue. It's not a Russian issue. It's not a German issue. This is an issue where the United States can and must lead the entire planet in transforming our energy system. And today we say to the prison industrial complex that we are sick and tired of having more people in jail than any other country on earth. Over 2 million Americans now in jail. We're spending $80 billion a year at the local, state, and federal level locking up fellow Americans. Now, it seems to me that it makes a hell of a lot more sense for us to be investing in jobs and education for our young people than in jails and incarceration. And when we talk about criminal justice reform, we are talking about ending private jails and detention centers. We are talking about ending the so-called war on drugs. And we are talking about no longer keeping people in jail for the crime of being poor and not being able to afford cash bail. And today, we say loudly and clearly that instead of demonizing the undocumented immigrants in this country, we are going to pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path toward citizenship. We are going to provide legal status to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And we are going to develop a humane border policy for those who seek asylum. The United States of America is not and must never be about snatching babies from the arms of their mothers. Today we say to the military-industrial complex that we want a strong defense, but we do not need to spend more than the next 10 nations combined. And that we are going to invest in affordable housing, we're going to invest in public education, but we are not going to invest in never-ending wars. And I want to give you some good news. I want to give you some good news on that just a couple of weeks ago in the Senate, and I helped lead that effort in the House, where we had great leadership. For the first time in 45 years, the United States Congress utilized the War Powers Act to tell the president that the Saudi-led intervention in Yemen is unconstitutional, unauthorized, and has got to end. Now, Trump has said that he doesn't like endless wars. Well, Mr. President, now is the opportunity to carry out what you say. Sign the resolution that we passed. And sometimes, you know, I go out there and my right-wing colleagues, they say, well, Bernie is a nice guy. He's promising everybody everything. How are you going to pay for it, Bernie? And I will tell you exactly how we are going to pay for it. When we have massive levels of income and wealth inequality in this country, where the very wealthy are becoming wealthier, yeah, we are going to ask the millionaires and billionaires of this country to start paying their fair share of taxes. We are going to bring austerity to the large corporations of this country, not just working families. And let me very briefly tell you some of what we're going to enact once together. And I use the word together not just as a rhetorical expression, but as something that is fundamental to what this campaign is about. And let me tell you what I think very few, if any, other candidates will tell you. And that is that no president, not the most honest or well-intentioned, can do it alone. And the reason for that, and this is not what you're going to ever see on TV, and you're not going to hear much about in the media, but the reason for that is that the powers that be, and I'm talking about Wall Street, where 6 financial institutions have assets equivalent to 54% of the GDP in America. 6. Talking about the pharmaceutical industry that has endless amounts of money to spend, the insurance companies. We're talking about the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex. We're talking about the corporate media. These guys have incredible power. And what our campaign is about, yes, we're going to win the Democratic nomination. Yes, we're going to defeat Donald Trump. But this campaign is not just about winning an election. I would not be running for president if that's all it was about. What this election is about is transforming this country. And no president can do it alone. And the most important thing that's happened in the last 6 or 7 weeks that we have been in this campaign is that in an unprecedented way, we now have well over 1 million Americans in every state in this country, in every congressional district in this country, who are prepared to roll up their sleeves and get involved in an unprecedented grassroots campaign. So let me just briefly tell you some of what we do. We're going to establish a federal jobs guarantee. All right? You know what that means? That means that in this country, from childcare to rebuilding our infrastructure to dealing with climate change, to healthcare, to education. There is an enormous amount of work to be done. Let's put our people to work rebuilding America. When we're in the White House, we're going to end the epidemic of gun violence. We're going to pass common sense gun safety legislation. That is what the American people want, and that's what we're going to give them. When we are in the White House, we're going to protect a woman's right to control her own body. You know, I have all of my conservative colleagues, they say, get the government off of the backs of the people, except when it comes to a woman. It is a woman who controls her own body, not the federal government, not the state government, not the local government. So, brothers and sisters, we got a lot of work in front of us. We are not just taking on Trump and Republicans. We're taking on parts of the Democratic establishment. We're taking on corporate America. We're taking on Wall Street. We're taking on the drug companies. We're taking on the insurance companies. We're taking them all on. But I believe, this is what I believe. You know, the 1% has literally endless amounts of money and they have extraordinary power. But at the end of the day, the 1% is 1%. Now, I may not be a great mathematician, but the 99% are a lot more people than the 1%. So if we stand together, keep our eyes on the prize, and that prize is a government and an economy that works for us. This is not magical. This is not tough stuff. We all know what the issues are. The issues are decent jobs. The issues are health care. The issues are education. The issues are breathing clean air and drinking clean water and saving the planet. The issues are a democracy which is controlled by the people and not by billionaire campaign contributors. So if we stand together, and if we don't allow Trump and his friends to divide us up by the color of our skin, or by the country in which we were born, or by our sexual orientation, or by our religion, or by our agenda. If we stand together as Americans, North and South, East and West, when we stand together, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. So I thank you all for coming out. Thank you all very much.
Downplay him, he still gon' fight. Tell him all he ain't playing. Push him for higher wages so we all can feed our families. The only one I know who can conquer this insanity of this Wall Street bickering, belittling the poor. Dollar bills, only thing they considering. When people need health care, kids need school. When it comes to politics, Bernie's breaking rules.